Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a young girl will stand trial in one of last May's wildfires. And a decision from SeaWorld means trainers won't go back into the killer whale tanks. Also tonight, we may be in for more thunder, lightning, and rain. What last night's unusual storm means for the region's wine growers.
And hundreds of birds are dying as they fly over a massive solar plant in the Mojave Desert. I'm Peggy Pico with details of the problem and some possible solutions. Plus, why are men of color having a tougher time than other students in community colleges? What's being done to improve the odds?
And some surprising folks are getting caught up in the Ice Bucket Challenge. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A girl accused of setting one of last May's wildfires has been found competent to stand trial after a mental evaluation. She wasn't, or rather hasn't been identified because she's a juvenile. She's actually accused of setting the Cocos fire in San Marcos. It burned more than 2,000 acres. The girl will be arraigned next month. SeaWorld says it won't appeal findings by federal safety inspectors done after the death of a whale trainer in 2010. The statement came in a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. SeaWorld's decision means trainers will stay out of the water during killer whale shows. Flash flood watch continues tonight for San Diego's beaches, and we may still see some thunderstorms. There was quite a light show in the North County overnight, and earlier today, local beaches were closed for a while because of lightning. There were more than 100 strikes in coastal waters before 9:30 this morning. The storm is also causing some worries for wine growers in Temecula up north. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson joins us from the newsroom to explain. Eric, what happened?
Well, Dwayne, as grape farmer Michael Rennie put it, the storm that moved through the Temecula Valley on Tuesday night was a bit unexpected. In fact, when I talked to him about it earlier today, Rennie said the rough weather kept him up all night.
Well, it almost felt like I was in Kansas or something. I mean, I'm a native Californian, and it's very odd that we're getting this kind of weather in August. It's very unusual, and we had thunder, lightning. We actually had some hail that apparently lasted for about 30 seconds.
Now, the rain typically happens very early in the year, and there was less rainfall than normal this year because of the regional drought. Rennie says he's lived in Southern California his whole life and only remembers August having rain a couple of times in Riverside County.
So any damage to the grape crop?
Well, Rennie says there was very little direct damage from the storm itself. The drought actually caused many plants to bud early, and it allowed farmers to pick their white grapes in July. Now, he says that growers are in the midst of their red grape harvest, and he says the rainfall will be sucked up by the vines, and that could impact the sugar content or the acidity levels of the fruit. Now, Rennie says that could just prompt a delay. He says the harvest could resume in a couple of days as the plants readjust to the drier climate.
KPBS reporter Eric Anderson. San Diego's disgraced former mayor was once again answering questions about sexual harassment claims today, this time in a deposition for a lawsuit filed by a city employee. She says Bob Filner harassed her last year at Mission Bay Park. The woman's lawyer talked after the deposition, saying Filner looked healthy and at peace, but didn't remember the incident. A surprising new development tonight in the fight over developing the former Escondido Country Club. Councilwoman and mayoral candidate Olga Diaz now says she backs a controversial ballot measure to allow development. Proposition H would let the property's owner build 430 homes on the site. Just last year, Diaz stood with the rest of the Escondido Council who wanted to keep the land as open space. Now, she says Prop H is a good compromise. She says the city spent thousands in the case already.
All taxpayers in the city are funding that legal fight. The greatest beneficiaries of that fight are the residents directly near the golf club. And it's never going to be golf again. So here we have a plan that's put forth that, again, is not perfect, but it's pretty good. And we may never see an offer this good again.
The country club shut down last year. The owner says it's no longer economically viable. Neighbors say their property values will drop if homes go in. Tonight, American drones and fighter jets are continuing their strikes against Islamic State extremists in Iraq. U.S. officials are weighing the possibility of sending a small number of troops to Baghdad. This comes a day after the militants released video of the murder of American journalist James Foley. President Obama says the entire world is appalled by the killing and says the U.S. will be relentless against the Islamic State.
Let's be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence. They abduct women and children and subject them to torture and rape and slavery. They have murdered Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, by the thousands. They target Christians and religious minorities, driving them from their homes, murdering them when they can, for no other reason than they practice a different religion.
James Foley visited San Diego State University 9 months before he was kidnapped in 2012. He told students about his role in covering the Arab Spring, describing it as a life-changing experience.
It's a passion for telling stories. It's a passion for using media to tell stories. You know, there's so many tools we can use, but I think it's about a passion for a place, a passion for different kinds of people communicating.
We have more of that discussion with James Foley on our website, kpbs.org. Today, President Obama also talked about Islamic State militants killing religious minorities. Leaders of San Diego's Iraqi Chaldean community want the U.S. to start pulling their relatives out of Iraq. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks joins us from the News Center to talk us through what the U.S. can actually do. We saw Chaldean Catholics rallying in El Cajon last night, seeking asylum for religious minorities being either forced out or killed by extremists. What has the U.S. done so far, Megan?
Well, it was actually calls from those El Cajon residents to Congressman Juan Vargas's office that put what many are now calling genocide on the White House and State Department's radar. Those residents were hearing from relatives back home of brutal killings and people being exiled from their homes. As a result of those calls, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution condemning the ISIS offensive, and the president authorized airstrikes and humanitarian aid. Now Vargas is looking to increase the number of Iraqi refugees allowed in the United States.
Now, is there a limit on how many refugees we can take in?
There is a cap. Each year, the president decides how many refugees the United States will take from various regions. This fiscal year, he set the overall ceiling at 70,000 people, with 33,000 allowed to come from Middle Eastern countries. Now, that cap is for individuals who are applying for refugee status from abroad. There is no limit, however, on the number of individuals to whom we can grant asylum. That's for people who flee directly to a U.S. port of entry and can't return home.
And what can the U.S. do to help Chaldeans still in Iraq or its surrounding countries?
Well, the president could try to raise the overall cap, but it would require Congress to release additional money. He could also shift around some of those regional allotments to open more spots for Iraqis, but that could impact people being persecuted elsewhere. There is a more drastic measure. The president could take executive action and evacuate people from Iraq, similar to how Gerald Ford brought tens of thousands of Vietnamese to the U.S. in the 70s.
Right. Is that last option on the table?
Well, in his Monday speech, President Obama focused on the success of limited military operations to help the Iraqi government regain control. Congressman Vargas says he plans to take some kind of action to help displace Iraqis when Congress is back from recess next month.
Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks. County medical examiner says a drug overdose killed a UC San Diego student after last May's Sun God Festival on campus. 20-year-old Ricardo Ambrez had overdosed on a stimulant known as Benzo Fury. The campus had worked to make the music festival safer this year because dozens of students went to hospitals and detox centers after last year's festival. Los Angeles will pay $5 million to settle a lawsuit by the family of a disabled veteran from Oceanside shot to death by L.A. police last December. Brian Beard was shot at the end of an hour-long televised car chase. The family originally sued for $20 million. And Highway Patrol says it's completed its investigation of a beating incident involving a mentally disturbed woman along a Los Angeles freeway. The CHP officer could face serious charges. The beating was recorded on a cell phone. Investigators have sent their findings to the LA County District Attorney. The officer is now on administrative leave. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder visited Ferguson, Missouri this afternoon, part of the federal response to the death of teenager Michael Brown. He was killed by a police officer more than a week ago. The shooting sparked days of protests and clashes with police. Today, Holder met with Brown's parents and community members. Earlier this year, President Obama announced the My Brother's Keeper initiative to help colleges do a better job of addressing the needs of minority men. Peggy Pico explains how local researchers are involved.
With fewer men of color graduating at the community college level, there's a local effort underway to find out why and offer solutions. The project is called the Minority Male Community College Collaborative. Here with the details is co-director of the program, Luke Wood. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Luke, what does your research reveal as to why men of color are having issues in community college?
Okay. Well, we've partnered with 40 community colleges in 8 states to really investigate what are the factors that influence their success. And we really kind of broken it down into 2 main areas. The first area focuses on what we call campus ethos. That's the environment and conditions that are created at the college that make students feel like they're validated, like you belong, you can succeed, I believe in you. Or it makes them feel like they belong at the institution. It makes them feel like they can engage in the classroom like faculty members want them to do so. So that's one set of factors that we've seen has been really important. The other side really deals with masculinity. When we talk about men of color, sometimes we forget that they're men. Men sometimes are less likely to seek out help. And if you're less likely to do so, you may be less likely to meet with a faculty member, go to academic advising, go to tutoring, and so we consider both of those parts.
How were you able to get this data?
So what we do is we survey men in community colleges, all men across the board, who are trying to earn a certificate, degree, or transfer.
And as far as specifics, did you interview them? Did you have a survey?
Well, in terms of our most recent study, which deals with faculty members, we've taken data from our survey of men. We've also done interviews with faculty members who are leaders in serving men of color. And we've also done interviews with men of color and taken narratives from those who have been successful in transferring from a 2-year college to a 4-year college.
Are some of these challenges specific to minority men in general, or do they actually differ between the different races?
That's a great question. Actually, what we've seen is that there's a lot of difference between groups. We look at differences between black students in terms of what affects their success, and Latino students and Asian American students, broken down into several groups. One of the groups that we're really concerned about is Southeast Asian men, Hmong, Cambodian, Laotian men, who oftentimes have experiences and outcomes on par with that of other men of color.
What are some of the key recommendations as far as improving the odds for either this specific group or for all men of color in the community college level?
Okay. Well, one of the recommendations really deals with developing faculty members. We really believe that faculty members must be taught how to engage with men of color in the classroom. And a lot of it deals with the relationships themselves, whether men of color feel like they can trust that faculty member. So before even we can talk about what's good teaching, we have to talk about how do you build relationships with those men. The next part we talk about deals with what we call early alert systems. So that's when you have a student who is missing a couple classes or falls behind in a couple of assignments. There should be an automatic trigger that then lets the faculty member know, hey, this student isn't doing well. I might need to send them to support services on campus, and then helping make those linkages between the student and those services.
And I understand some of your recommendations actually start way before that and trying to increase the success of minority men in college. How early should they start?
Cradle. You know, we look a lot at early childhood education because that's actually where the gaps really begin. These men early on are taught by teachers who are primarily white and female. So they're taught that school early on is a domain.
So you're talking kindergarten, grade school, all the way through.
Preschool, kindergarten, grade school, they're taught primarily by white women. And as a result, they view the structure of power in the classroom as one of that belonging to white women. Therefore, if they engage in the classroom, in some ways they can be negating their own identity. So think about how we can create more of a pipeline of teachers who are men of color, who are also women and women of color. We want to have a diverse pipeline of teachers so that students see people who look like them in the classroom.
How will these recommendations and this data that you found actually fit into the national initiative of My Brother's Keeper?
Yeah, well, recently the Obama administration released the My Brother's Keeper initiative, and what they've done is they have 4 of their 6 main points look at what can we do in education to improve outcomes for boys and men of color. We believe that our work directly informs that initiative in that we're saying to policymakers, these are some things that you can do that can help improve outcomes for these men. And some of them are simple. And the benefit is a lot of the recommendations that we have are things that not only benefit men of color, but they benefit all students, because if you can affect those students most on the margin, you can affect everyone.
So we are almost out of time, so I have to end on this one. But if you could name 1 or 2 of those recommendations that you say would benefit everyone.
Okay. One would be starting student equity plans. So when a college identifies outcome gaps between different students, creating and putting plans of action in place that can help you to serve those students better. Again, creating early warning systems and early alert systems to help identify students and other practices.
All right, researcher Luke Wood, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Republican candidate for California governor is offering $25,000 in college tuition or money for the student who comes up with the best 30-second ad for the Neil Kashkari campaign. Kashkari has been trailing Governor Brown in funding and in the polls. He says it's a way to encourage students to join the political process. San Diego Chargers clinched their division title last season, but it doesn't mean a lot in dollars and cents. The Bolts ranked 26 out of 32 NFL teams in a Forbes ranking of most valuable franchises. The Dallas Cowboys topped the list at $3.2 billion, followed by the New England Patriots, then Washington, and the New York Giants. Last year's Super Bowl champs, the Seattle Seahawks, ranked number 15. The Forbes list is based on equity and debt and each team's stadium situation. A pole-out ceremony was held near Patrick Henry High School in Del Cerro today, where SDG&E crews removed one of the last overhead utility poles in the neighborhood. San Diego's goal is to eventually place all power lines underground. It used to be a familiar sight, a pair of sneakers dangling from a power pole. Since 2003, the city, along with assistance from SDG&E, have proactively removed more than 5,000 utility poles and replaced them with underground distribution lines covered by green utility boxes.
This is my neighborhood. I went to Patrick Henry just around the corner here as a young man, so I know it well. And it's very good to see it now without all the wires and the poles and that kind of thing stringing across the street.
It does come at a cost to neighbors who pay a monthly 3 to 4% surcharge on their utility bill to get rid of the tangled web of power lines.
Don't see nearly as many tennis shoes strung together and hanging over the wires as you used to.
61 poles were removed from this neighborhood, covering about 3 miles and more than 225 homes.
It improves property values, quality of life. It brings out a little more pride in the community.
Undergrounding also reduces the possibility of power lines being affected by car accidents and high winds during storms. So far, 200 miles of power lines have been placed underground, with 1,100 miles to go.
And it's a collaboration, kind of between the city, the different utility providers, the Cox and Time Warner and AT&T. Everybody had to come together with the community, work together.
It can take up to 2 years to complete a neighborhood pole-out project. Crews are currently working in the Allied Gardens area. California's solar power plants are being blamed for the death of hundreds of birds. Peggy Pico explores the problem and possible solutions.
The Ivanpah solar plant is on 3,500 acres in the Mojave Desert. The plant utilizes hundreds of thousands of mirrors, each the size of a garage door, to reflect solar rays into 3 450-foot tall towers. The energy concentration is so hot, birds are being burned to death as they fly over the plant, according to reports from the California Energy Commission. Joining me in studio is Jim Pugh with the San Diego chapter of the Audubon Society, and by phone, Jeff Holland of Carlsbad-based NRG, which co-owns the Ivanpah plant. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Now, Jeff, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services released a report analyzing the bird deaths at Ivanpah. Of the 141 birds found dead there, about a third, they say, were killed by solar flux. The report calls Ivanpah a mega trap for birds of all sizes. How does solar flux kill these birds?
I wanted to first thank you for taking the time to talk to us before reporting on it. But I just wanted to also stress that we take issues like this extremely seriously, and we've been working on efforts to minimize the facility's environmental impact, but we'd like to state that the number of avian species with effects attributed to the project is significantly less than what's been reported.
Okay, and we definitely want to get back to the species, but is the idea that dead birds are just a part of being, having green energy, of technology, or is there a way to solve the problem and prevent this from happening?
Peggy, if I could take that, every industrial project, whether it involves transportation or infrastructure improvement, comes with the risk of unfortunate and unplanned effects. I think we need to keep in mind when we're talking about this in the discussion that climate change is by far the biggest threat to life on Earth, and we've spent billions of dollars at NRG on projects like Ivanpah and our quest to find ways to provide clean and sustainable and renewable energy. And this project itself, Ivanpah, provides clean energy to 140,000 California residents.
And we will get back to the bird issue and prevention, because I know there's some things going on, but I want to ask Jim and bring you in on this. So Jeff mentioned the birds, the species being impacted by this. I understand the report names 71 different species, including hawks and owls and things like that. What's the Audubon's take on the situation?
Well, this is a real tragedy. A lot of the birds that will be killed by this plant won't make it to San Diego. So it has a real local impact, but it has a huge impact overall. And we're really concerned that they learn from what the problems are and they figure out how to correct them. That a lot of study needs to be done before anything like this is tried anywhere else. And that's one of our major concerns, is that all the details, all the problems get worked out at this plant before anybody tries to go farther with it. And
build new plants. But Jeff, I do know that I definitely know that Ivanpah has put out some ideas or plans on how to mitigate the situation. Can you tell us a few of those?
Yeah, I certainly can. In fact, we've been working with California Energy Commission, members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Game, and the Bureau of Land Management to come up with humane deterrent methods. Some of those involve simple things like waste and water containment, to heliostat or mirror repositioning for glare diffusion, to things like anti-perching devices, screening, and sonic deterrent methods, things that are employed in airports across the country as well that we've seen has been effective in mitigating some of these issues.
Well, Jim, what does the Audubon Society think about these ideas to sort of mitigate the issues? Are they enough?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of other ways that they can. The Fish and Wildlife Service of Forensics Lab has also pointed out a lot of other measures that can be tried, and we encourage them to really work hard on those and make sure they get them all right. So a lot of things can be done. We haven't scratched the surface, and as far as the kills too, there are a lot of birds that are damaged that will die later too, and so the numbers. The numbers could be far more than we know, and we need to understand all of those issues before anyone moves forward.
And you're talking about moving forward, and Jeff, I'll point this at you. NRG actually wants to build an even bigger solar plant called Palin that uses the same or similar technology as Ivanpah with those towers. What's being done as that proposed plant goes on to make it safer for birds and other wildlife?
No, Peg, I'm sorry, that's a little incorrect. Well, actually, completely incorrect. That's a different project. It's called the Palin Project, and that's being built by a company called BrightSource. And maybe the confusion is that BrightSource supplies the technology, the power tower technology, to the Ivanpah Project and a couple others, and now they are the ones that are seeking permitting for this other Palin facility that you're talking about.
Right, correct. I do stand corrected on that, and I understand that. But overall, when it goes forward as far as even BrightSource and building future massive mega solar plants, are there plans that will address, do you think, as far as these concerns over wildlife and bird deaths?
Yeah, and I think as Jim alluded to, this is a process. This is a long process that we have to thoroughly test and monitor all these systems in accord with the avian and bat monitoring and management plan that we've put in place, and working with the appropriate agencies to ensure that we're working through, our technical advisory committee, and that we're doing the right things and we're understanding the issue, that we're conducting the research that feeds the science, and we need to study this and find out, number one, what the cause of the problem is, and then work on deterrent methods like I talked about to help mitigate those.
All right, we are out of time. So Jeff Holland, thanks for joining us from Arizona, and Jeff Pugh from the Audubon Society, thank you for joining us here on the Jim Pugh, thank you for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you,
Thanks for Thanks for your time.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, Margaret Warner reports on the humanitarian crisis in Iraq for ethnic minorities targeted by Islamic militants. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
I do not think it's presidential for me to be splashed with ice water, so I'm simply going to write you a check.
Oh, that was cold. Former First Lady Laura Bush apparently doesn't agree with her husband dousing him with ice water, cold, as part of a campaign to fight ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. The challenge has gone viral. Check this out. Even California's first dog got into the act, Sutter Brown stepping in for Governor Jerry Brown. We want to remind you there's a flash flood watch until 9 tonight for San Diego area beaches. More thunderstorms are in the coastal forecast for tomorrow morning, with some clearing expected by the afternoon. Inland valleys could also get some thunderstorms, with temperatures mostly in the mid-80s over the next couple of days. The stormy weather is expected to last until tomorrow night in the mountain areas. Daytime temperatures there in the upper 70s. As for the desert, one more day of storms, then sunshine and hot, sticky temperatures. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.